The lockbox from the back of my bedroom closet felt cold and heavy in my hands, a solid weight of the past. My daughter, Susan, stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tight. "Just throw it out, Mum," she said, her voice firm. "It's just old tax papers from Dad. You need to clear out his things, not dwell on them." I heard that impatient tone in her voice, the same one she uses with her own teenagers. She's been hovering over me like this ever since my Frank's funeral 6 months ago, treating me as if I'm another one of her projects. The physical pressure from the box was nothing. The real weight was from her watching me, from her thinking her 72-year-old mother couldn't handle a simple task. It made me feel small, and more than a little angry. I gave her my softest, most grandmotherly smile, one I've perfected over years of calming down fussy grandchildren and smoothing over family squabbles. "You're right, dear. I'm just being a silly old sentimentalist. I'll deal with it later. Don't you have that school board meeting to get to?" I saw her shoulders relax, the tight line of her mouth soften. She bought the act. The moment I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I carried the box to my kitchen table, the morning sun warming the familiar, worn surface. Frank was always so orderly, a man who believed every important paper had its proper place. But this old metal box had no key with it, which was strange for him. Not that I needed one to find it. I remembered. I walked into the den, the room that still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco, and reached behind his favourite golf trophy on the shelf. There it was, a little brass key taped to the back, just like he'd told me once years ago, for the real important things. My hands, which sometimes tremble now when I'm tired, were perfectly steady as I fitted into the lock and pried the stiff lid open. Inside, there were no tax forms. My breath caught in my throat. Lying right on top was a small hair ribbon. It was pink, with little white daisies on it. I'd bought one just like it for our granddaughter, Chloe, the summer she turned 7, the summer she vanished on a family picnic. We never saw her again. My heart felt like a cold stone in my chest. Beneath the ribbon was a faded Polaroid photo, the edges curled. It showed a patch of woods, some pine trees, and rocky ground near what looked like a creek. I didn't recognize the spot. It wasn't from our old picnics. Under the photo was a single worn gardening glove, the kind Frank used for weeding. It was crusted with dried, dark dirt that looked very, very old. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, the wood creaking under me, staring at these strange, sad things my husband had hidden away. What was this collection? What had Frank known about our Chloe's disappearance that he had never, ever told me? A cold feeling of dread settled deep in my bones, right next to the old, familiar ache of loss. I sat at my old Formica kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the faded curtains, and that little pink ribbon felt like a slap right across my heart. The steady hum from my refrigerator was the only sound in the quiet house. I had to take deep breaths, in and out, to steady myself. I couldn't let the screaming in my head show on my face, not even a flicker. To admit what this meant would destroy the man I'd loved for over 50 years, my Frank. I felt a heavy, pressing weight on my chest, knowing my daughter Susan would be back from her errands in a few hours. She'd expect a tidy house and a calm mother, not this emotional mess scattered across the table. With trembling hands, I carefully laid the 3 things out in a row on the smooth table surface. First, the old Polaroid photo, its edges curled with age. It showed a muddy creek bank and the gnarled roots of a big, twisted willow tree. It was a specific place down near Miller's Creek. Frank had taken that picture himself. I remembered the day. Then, the gardening glove. It was his, from a set I bought him years ago for his 60th birthday. He loved puttering in the yard. One glove from that pair went missing back then. He said he'd lost it while weeding the flower beds, and I never thought another thing about it. And then there was the ribbon, a little pink satin ribbon with tiny white daisies printed on it. I had one just like it upstairs in my memory box. A wave of sickness washed over me, sour and cold. My granddaughter Chloe was just 7 years old that summer. We had a big family picnic at the park by the creek. She'd worn her hair in pigtails that day, tied with those very ribbons. She lost one, her favourite, and was so upset. We all looked and looked for what felt like hours. Frank helped us search, crawling along the ground near the picnic blanket. He finally straightened up, brushed the grass from his knees, and said we'd never find it, that it was probably carried off by the wind or a squirrel. I stood up now, my knees cracking the way they do more and more these days, a reminder of my age. I went to the hall closet, my steps slow, and got down my plastic bin of old memories. I found the photo album from that very year. There she was, my beautiful Chloe, grinning with a gap in her teeth from losing a baby tooth, her hair in those pigtails. And in one photo, plain as day, tied neatly in her hair, was that pink daisy ribbon. The exact same one now lying on my kitchen table. I felt dizzy and had to hold on to the table edge, the formica cool under my palms. Frank didn't find it later. He'd had it all along, all these years. A terrible, quiet click settled in my mind, like a lock snapping shut. It was final. The man who held my hand when our children were born, who patiently taught our son to ride a bike right in this driveway, who bounced our grandbabies on his knee and sang them silly songs. That same man had done something horrible, something I couldn't even bring myself to name, and I was the only one who knew. The loneliness of that knowledge was a cold, heavy stone right in the center of my chest. I had to put everything away before Susan came home. I moved slowly, my heart aching with a deep, old sadness I didn't yet have words for, carefully returning each item to its hiding place, smoothing my apron as if I could smooth away the truth. I just had to find the spot from that photograph. I needed to see that twisted tree and the bend in the creek for myself, but quietly, without making a fuss. If I told my daughter Susan what I suspected now, it would break her heart before I even knew the whole story. She calls me every single evening at 6, like clockwork, just to check in. So I had until her call to look. I took Frank's old sedan, the one Susan's always telling me I should finally sell. The photo looked familiar, like somewhere we might have had a family picnic years ago, and I figured it was within an hour's drive. My first thought was the state park. We took the kids there all the time when they were young. That's where our granddaughter, Chloe, disappeared. But nothing in that park matched the picture. My old knees were complaining, but I drove out to a regional nature preserve next. I walked the trails until my back ached, my eyes searching for that specific gnarled tree root from the photo. I was ready to give up. I felt so defeated. I took a wrong turn onto a muddy, overgrown service road, and that's when I saw it. There it was, the big, twisted oak tree, and the exact bend in the little creek, just like in the Polaroid. The air just rushed out of me. This wasn't some accident. This was a specific place. My Frank had come here to take a picture of it, to remember it. I stood on the creek bank, looking down at the dark, soft soil. This was the kind of place where someone would use a gardening glove for one grim purpose. I didn't have a shovel, and I didn't need one. I just knew. The proof was right there in how carefully he'd composed that photo. He was proud of what he'd done. The thought made me sick. As I turned to go back to the car, my foot caught on a root. I stumbled and threw my hand out against the rough tree bark to steady myself. It scraped my palm. Wincing, I looked down at where my hand had been. There, carved into the wood, faint but done on purpose, were three initials. They weren't Chloe's initials. They were other names, other girls. My heart went cold. This wasn't just about our Chloe. It was so much bigger. I leaned my forehead against the cold bark, thinking of those other families, those other grandmothers waiting for a call that would never come. What had my husband been involved in? I felt a deep, frightening anger settle in my bones. This was about more than just our family's tragedy now. He had secrets that hurt other families too. I had to get home before Susan called. I needed to sit in my own kitchen and think about what to do next. The carved initials in that old oak tree were like a list, a terrible list. Now I had to document them, to see if they really were linked to missing people. Doing that would mean tearing apart my family's history, my children's memory of their father. I stood there under that big tree in the park and felt a heavy sadness. I am a grandmother, for heaven's sake. My grandkids play here. What was I getting into? I used my phone to take pictures of every set of initials. My Frank never did understand these smartphones. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. The grieving widow was gone. In her place was just a tired, worried woman trying to find the truth. I drove home in a daze. My daughter Susan called just as I walked into my kitchen. "Just checking in, Mom. You sound tired." "It's just been a long day sorting through your father's things," I told her, keeping my voice nice and even. I didn't want to worry her. After we hung up, I made a cup of tea, but just let it get cold. The things from Frank's lockbox weren't just mementos anymore. They felt like evidence. I knew I needed to find more. Frank was always so meticulous. If he had that one lockbox, he had to have another hiding place. Somewhere he was sure I'd never look. I started in the garage, which was always his domain. I moved old paint cans and looked behind tools. Nothing. Then I remembered. Years ago, he showed me a false back in his bedside table drawer. He said he kept a little emergency cash there for if the grandkids needed something sudden. I went into our bedroom. My bedroom now. The drawer slid out easily. I felt along the back until my fingers found the little catch. The wooden panel came away, but there was no cash inside. There was a small, polished key. It wasn't for the house. It was a padlock key. The kind for a storage unit. My Frank had rented a storage unit? He never said a word about it to me. The key had a number stamped on it, 217, and a faded logo I finally recognized. It was for that private storage place out on the old highway. It's been there for 40 years. He'd been going there, paying for a space, for who knows how long without telling me. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cold teacup beside me. I held that key so tight, the metal pressed hard into my palm. I felt a cold wave of betrayal. What was in that unit? More lies about money, our savings, our house? Everything I thought was safe for me, and the family felt suddenly shaky. I was scared. Scared of what else my husband of 45 years had kept from me. The key in my hand felt like a ticket to a destination I never wanted to reach. I needed to go to that storage unit, number 217, before the place closed at 7 o'clock. The drive there felt like the last bit of my comfortable denial slipping away. It was the final walk into the heart of my late husband Frank's secret life, a life he had hidden from me for decades. I felt the clock ticking inside my chest, and I was so terribly scared of what I'd have to face there all alone. Here I am, a grandmother in my 70s. My biggest worries should be about whether my roses will bloom or if I'll burn the cookies for my grandson's visit. I should be fretting over my grandchildren's school plays and ballet recitals, not about what my husband of 50 years left locked away behind a metal door. I arrived at Safekeep Storage just after 6:15. The evening was fading into dusk. The place was a stark maze of identical metal garage doors under the harsh buzz of yellow security lights. A bored young man with headphones on was slouched in the brightly lit office. I tapped on the glass and showed him the key. "It's my late husband's unit," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I just need to see what's inside." He glanced at the key tag, checked a large ledger book on the counter, and gave a small shrug. "Number 217, Frank Peterson. It's paid up." He simply pointed a thumb down the long row. That casual normalcy chilled me deeper than any suspicion. Frank had paid this bill for years, quietly tucked into our household budget, a monthly bill I had never, ever seen. My hands were unsteady as I found the unit and worked the padlock. I rolled up the heavy metal door, and it clattered and groaned loudly in the quiet alley. A single bare bulb flickered on, lighting a small, almost empty space. Right in the middle sat one solitary thing, a tall, old-fashioned wooden cabinet with many little drawers, the kind a seamstress or a collector might use. It was beautifully made, of polished oak, and it looked utterly wrong and too fine for this dusty concrete place. I took a step inside, and the door rattled shut behind me, leaving me alone with it. My heart was pounding. I reached out and opened the first small drawer. It contained neat rows of clear plastic boxes. Each held a small, innocuous item: a child's barrette, a cheap plastic bracelet, a tarnished class ring. Each had a small typed label with a name and a date. My eyes scanned them, and one name snagged in my memory from a snippet of local news years back. A teenage girl who'd vanished. My breath caught sharp and painful in my throat. A cold, solid dread settled in my stomach. Trembling, I pulled open another drawer. More boxes, more names, some going back 30 years. The bottom drawer was wider. Inside was one deep, long box. I lifted the lid. It was packed with old Polaroid pictures, the kind with the white border. They were pictures of girls, young girls, teenagers. They didn't look happy. They looked scared or blank. The one right on top made my legs give way. It was my granddaughter, Chloe. It was from our big family picnic at the lake last summer. She was smiling brightly, holding a red juice box, her hair in a ponytail. On the back, in Frank's familiar, neat handwriting, was last summer's date, labelled as the date she disappeared. And beneath it, one single word: perfect. I had to brace myself against the cold, corrugated metal wall. The air felt thin. That beautiful cabinet held a lifetime of horrible secrets. They were trophies, and my sweet, lively Chloe was meant to be his final one. The walls of the unit seemed to press inward. I had the proof now, solid and awful and crushing in my hands. Now came the impossible weight of decision. What in heaven's name does a grandmother do with a truth like this? A truth that could shatter my children and tear my whole family apart forever. I closed the lid of that box like it was a coffin. My fingers were numb. The silence in the storage unit was so heavy it pressed on my ears. I had to get this terrible evidence somewhere safe, somewhere my daughter Susan would never find it. She likes to help me tidy up, and I couldn't risk her seeing this. But I couldn't just walk out with a whole cabinet. My safety deposit box at the bank is too small. I needed a new hiding place, and I needed it now before they locked up for the night. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. I started taking pictures. Not of the things inside, but of the labels on the drawers. Every name and date. The picture of my Chloe. I photographed every part of that cabinet. The click of the camera was a sharp little sound. This was my proof, my insurance. If something happened to me, I would still have these. I emailed the photos to myself. Then I made a new, secret email address right there, my old fingers clumsy on the small screen. It felt strange, doing this modern thing because of such an old, deep evil. A loud bang echoed from somewhere else in the facility, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was just a door, but it reminded me I wasn't alone. The young man in the office knew I was here. I had to act normal. I couldn't take the whole cabinet, but I could take one thing. I carefully lifted the Polaroid of my smiling Chloe from the box. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my purse, right next to my heart medication. I felt a terrible sadness. Then I closed the cabinet, locked the unit, and walked back to the office, making my legs move at a slow, grandmotherly pace. The young man barely looked up from his phone. "Find what you needed?" he asked, sounding bored. "Just some old family photos," I said, and my voice was steady. "I might come back another day to sort through it properly." He just grunted. As I drove away, the photo in my purse felt heavier than the steering wheel. I didn't go home. I drove to the library. I needed to use a computer no one could trace back to me. I sat at a public terminal in a hard plastic chair. I started searching. One by one, I typed in the names from the labels. I looked in local news archives and missing persons pages. Every single name was a match. It was a cold, final confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. My Frank hadn't just taken our Chloe. He had a history. A long, hidden one. I printed out the articles, the faces of other girls from other families. My hands were steady now, filled with a grim purpose. The library printer hummed and gave me page after page of tragedy. I gathered them up. I had the map now. I just had to figure out where to go next. The papers from the library felt dangerous on the car seat. I couldn't take them inside. My daughter Susan was coming for our Wednesday dinner. Since my Frank passed, she checks on me weekly, always offering to help organize my mail. I needed a hiding spot. I thought of his old workshop shed. It's dusty and smells of oil and pine. Susan never goes in there. She says it's too sad. When I pulled in, her car was already there. My heart sank. I quickly shoved the printouts and my purse with that awful photo under my seat, covering them with an old grocery blanket. I took a breath, put on a smile, and got out. "Mom, you're late," Susan said, coming out wiping her hands on a towel. She'd started cooking. "Oh, I lost track of time at the library," I said. They had a display about local birds. The lie came easily. Looking at her concerned face, I felt so guilty. Dinner was meatloaf and mashed potatoes. I could barely taste it. Susan talked about her children, my grandchildren, soccer games and school projects. Every happy story felt like a bright light in a dark room. I was too quiet. "You're quiet tonight, Mum. Are you okay?" she asked softly. "Is it about Dad's stuff? We can hire someone to clear the workshop." Her kindness made my chest ache. She wants to protect me from grief, not from Frank's secrets. "No, dear, I'm fine. Just tired," I said, patting her hand. "I love hearing about the children." She seemed reassured. After she left, the house felt terribly empty. I waited until full dark, then got a flashlight and went to the workshop. The key was under the old flower pot. Inside, the air was still. I went to his heavy workbench. A big metal vise is bolted to it. I loosened and lifted the base. Underneath was a little hollow space Frank showed me years ago for Christmas cash. It was empty. I put the rolled-up papers and the Polaroid in a plastic bag and laid it in the hole. I lowered the vise and tightened it. My evidence was sealed under solid iron. It felt safe. As I turned to leave, My flashlight caught a glint from a dusty jar on a high shelf. It was full of nails, screws, and keys. Several small brass Yale keys. They looked just like the key for that storage unit. My breath caught. There wasn't just one unit. Frank had other lockboxes, other hiding places. That cabinet in Unit 217 was just the first one I found. The problem was much bigger than I'd feared. Those extra keys in my kitchen jar felt like they were burning a hole in my mind. I had to know what they opened, but I couldn't go back to the storage place so soon. The young man in the office might remember me. I needed to understand Frank's habits better. I needed to go back to the beginning, to our family's heartbreak. That meant facing the one person I'd been avoiding. My son-in-law, David. He's Chloe's father. My granddaughter. The investigation into her disappearance nearly broke him and my daughter Susan. The police questioned everyone, even Frank. He was the last person who said he saw her heading toward an ice cream truck. The next morning, I called David. I kept my voice calm. "David, honey, it's Mum. I'm going through some of Frank's old papers for the insurance company. I found the old police report about Chloe. I just have a question about a date. Could I stop by?" He sounded tired, but he agreed. Grief never ends. It just changes. He said Susan was at work. His house felt different, quieter. The happy noise of a little girl was long gone. David made coffee. We sat at his kitchen table, the same one where Chloe used to draw. He slid a worn folder to me. It was his copy of the file. "I haven't looked at this in years," he said. His voice was rough. "I wasn't really looking for a date. I was looking for a name. The lead detective. I skimmed the pages until I found it. Detective Raymond Miller. He'd retired. I remembered him. A kind man with sad eyes. "I just wanted to see the official order of things," I said. But my finger stopped under a line in the summary. Frank's statement was highlighted. A note in the margin, in the detective's writing, said, "Timeline tight. Alibi from wife." They had wondered about me. They thought I might have been covering for him. I felt a chill go down my spine. I closed the folder. "Thank you, David. This helps." He looked right at me. "Mum, are you okay? You seem very focused." I forced a small smile. "Just trying to tie up loose ends, dear. It gives a grandmother something to do." As I drove away, I knew my next step. I couldn't go to the current police. It was too connected to my family. It would cause a big scene. But I could talk to the retired detective. He knew the case. He might have had his own doubts he could never prove. I found his name in the phone book. He still lived nearby. Talking to him would open a door I could never shut. It would make this real for someone outside of my own head. I sat in my car outside David's house, my hands tight on the wheel. I was scared. I had to decide if I was ready to ruin a retired man's peace, and if I was ready to light a fuse that could blow my whole family apart. Calling Detective Miller felt like picking up a live wire. I dialed the number from my kitchen phone, the old cord twisted in my fingers. A man answered, his voice firm. "Miller." I took a breath. "Detective Miller, this is Evelyn Peterson, Frank Peterson's wife. You worked on my granddaughter Chloe's case." There was a long pause. I could picture him, an older man now, the ghost of a cold case walking back into his life. "Mrs. Peterson, of course. I'm sorry for your loss. Both of them." He meant Frank, too. The irony was a bitter taste. "I need to speak with you, in person. It's about Chloe, and about Frank. I've found some things." "What kind of things?" he asked. "Things he kept," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Things that connect to other girls." I heard a sharp breath. "Where and when?" he said, all business. We met at a quiet diner that had been there forever. He looked older, his hair white, but his eyes were watchful. I brought my phone. I slid it across the table, a photo showing an open drawer. He put on reading glasses. His face went still, then slowly drained of colour as he looked through the pictures of the labels. He recognized the names. He looked up at me, his eyes full of a weary horror. "He kept trophies," I said. I felt sick saying it. Miller leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "I wondered," he said quietly. His story was too clean, but with no evidence, and him being a pillar of the community, a grieving grandfather, we had nothing. He looked at me. "Why come to me, Evelyn? Why not go downtown right now?" I looked at my hands, my wedding band still there. "Because they'll take it over. It will be headlines. My daughter, her husband, my other grandchildren. They'll be the family of a monster. I need to know what I'm dealing with first. I need to understand how many." My voice broke. I was so angry and so sad, all mixed together. He nodded slowly. "The keys you mentioned. You think there are more places?" "I know there are," I said. He stirred his cold coffee. "I have a friend, retired, discreet. If Frank was doing this for years, there's a money trail. Storage units, travel. Money doesn't lie. Let me look into it." Quietly. He was offering a path to learn the truth without a media storm. It was a gift of time. I nodded, a lump in my throat. As I got up to leave, he gently touched my arm. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, "you need to be careful. Men like this often have plans. If he had a partner, or if someone else knows about these collections, you looking into things could alert them." A new, icy fear trickled down my spine. I had been so focused on the past, I hadn't considered the present. What if someone was still out there, watching? What if they came after my family's money or our home to keep their secrets? I thanked him and walked out, feeling more alone than ever. His warning about a possible partner stuck with me all the way home. The thought that someone else knew Frank's secrets, maybe watching the storage place or even me, made my own house feel unfamiliar. I checked every lock twice. It was a silly, fearful feeling I hadn't had since my children were small. My safe, quiet widow's life was gone, replaced by a steady worry. I couldn't just wait for the accountant Mr. Miller mentioned. I had to look for myself. Frank always handled the money. The details were in his home office. I spent the next day in there, going through filing cabinets, old checkbooks, and bank statements. My tired eyes almost missed it. A carbon copy of a money order stuck behind tax papers. It was made out to Safekeep Storage for a different unit, number 413. The date was from just 2 months before he died. My heart pounded. He had been active right up until the end. The payment was for a whole year. Unit 413 was paid for and current. I had a key for it from the kitchen jar. This wasn't an old archive. It was something new. What was in there? Was he planning another scheme? I had to see it, but going alone after that warning seemed foolish. Telling anyone felt like breaking the secret. I thought of my friend Agnes from book club. She's tough, practical, and discreet, I called her. "Agnes, I need a strange favor. I need you to drive me somewhere and wait. I can't say why yet." There was a pause. "Evelyn, are you in trouble?" "Yes," I said simply. "But not the kind you're thinking. I just need a friend." She agreed right away. We drove there in the late afternoon. I had Agnes park around the corner. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, call this number," I said, handing her Detective Miller's number. She nodded, her eyes wide. I walked in, head down. Thankfully, The young man wasn't at the desk. An older woman was doing a crossword. I went straight back to the units, the cold key for 413 in my hand. I found the door, listened, and only heard the buzz of the lights. I put the key in, turned the lock, and took a deep breath. I lifted the rolling door just enough to duck under. It was dark. I felt for the light cord. The bulb flickered on. The unit wasn't empty. Sitting right in the middle was one brand new wooden trunk. It was polished, with strong brass clasps. It looked expensive. And it was padlocked shut. A lock I had no key for. This was planned for a future that never happened. Then I saw it. Someone had placed a single, fresh white daisy on top of the dark wood. It hadn't wilted. It had been put there very recently. I felt a chill. Someone else had been here. The fresh daisy on that trunk meant someone had been here within the last day. The air in the unit felt colder, charged with a new, immediate danger. My first instinct was to run, but I made myself stay. I used my phone to take pictures of everything, the trunk from all angles, the daisy, the floor around it. I didn't touch a thing. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. I was an old woman in a concrete box, and someone knew about this place. I ducked back out, rolling the door down quietly until the lock clicked. I walked fast, my sensible shoes making quick taps on the asphalt. I didn't look back. I got in Agnes's car. "Drive, please. Just drive." She did, her knuckles white on the wheel. When we were a few blocks away, I told her about the daisy. "Someone is watching that place, Agnes, or watching me." She took me straight to her house, a cozy cottage full of knitted blankets and the smell of cinnamon. She made strong tea. "You have to tell the police, Evelyn. Now." I shook my head. "I can't. Not yet. This person left a flower, not a threat. It's a message. They're telling me they know I was there. If I bring in the police, they might disappear, or they might do something to my family." I thought of my daughter Susan, of my grandsons. The danger wasn't just to me anymore. I called Detective Miller from Agnes's landline. I told him about Unit 413 and the daisy. His voice was grim. "That changes things. It's active. Don't go back there. Let me and my contact work on the financial side. We'll find who paid the bill." But I couldn't just wait. The person who left that flower had access to Frank's world. They might know where all the keys were. They might come looking for what I had already taken. I had Agnes drive me home. The house felt like a target. I checked every window. Then I did the only thing I could think to do. I took the Polaroid of Chloe from its hiding place under the vise. I went to my grand, old-fashioned fireplace. I held the picture, looking at her sweet, smiling face. Then I struck a match. I watched the flame catch the corner, curl the image, and turn my granddaughter's stolen smile into ash. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, but no one could ever use that picture again. It was no longer a trophy. It was just grief, finally set free. I swept the ashes into the hearth. Now I had to protect the living. 2 days passed with no word from Miller. The silence was worse than the fear. Every car that slowed near my house made me jump. My daughter Susan called, her voice bright. "The boys have a soccer tournament this Saturday, Mum. Will you come?" The normalcy of it was a painful contrast. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice thick. How could I sit on a sunny sideline knowing what I knew? That afternoon, the doorbell rang. It wasn't Susan. It was a man in a neat suit, holding a leather binder. "Mrs. Peterson? I'm Robert Hill from First County Trust. I was your husband's financial advisor." My blood went cold. Frank never mentioned a financial advisor. "May I come in?" "There are some matters regarding his portfolio that need addressing." I let him in, my mind racing. He sat in Frank's armchair, opening his binder. He spoke about mutual funds and tax shelters, words that floated past me. Then he slid a document across the coffee table. It was a beneficiary form. As you can see, Frank listed you as the primary beneficiary on his investment account. However, there's a secondary, contingent beneficiary listed here. He pointed to a line. The name was typed, the Willow Creek Foundation. I had never heard of it. What is this? I asked. A charitable trust, it seems, Hill said pleasantly. Upon your passing, the residual assets would transfer to them. Quite common for estate planning. A charity. It sounded noble, but nothing about Frank was noble. Do you have paperwork for this foundation? A contact? Hill looked slightly uncomfortable. It's a private foundation. The correspondence address is a P.O. box here in town. Frank handled all the communication. I just processed the directives. He left me with copies. After he was gone, I stared at the name. Willow Creek. The creek in the Polaroid? The creek by the twisted tree. This wasn't a charity. It was a cover, a way to move money after we were both gone. Miller called just as the sun was setting. We found it, he said, no greeting. A P.O. box paid for by Frank for 20 years. The box is rented under the name W. Creek. The bank statements show small, regular donations going out to it from your joint household account, labelled charity. My hands were shaking. Where does the money go? It gets withdrawn as cash, every month, for 20 years. Someone had been receiving cash from Frank, monthly, for decades. A partner, a silent partner. And now, with Frank gone, that money had stopped. The daisy wasn't just a hello. It was a demand for payment. The monthly cash payments meant someone had relied on Frank. Now that he was gone, that stream had dried up. They would want it restarted. Or they would want the collection he'd promised, the trophies in the storage units. I was the only thing standing in the way. I couldn't sleep. I sat in my dark kitchen, the papers from the financial advisor spread out under the small light over the stove. The Willow Creek Foundation, a P.O. box. I thought about the person who could access that box. They lived here in town. They knew Frank for years. They'd kept his secret. Who had that kind of hold over him? Or who did he have a hold over? I thought of all the men Frank spent time with, his golf buddies, the guys from his old Rotary Club. None felt right. This was a secret of a different kind. Then I remembered something. Years ago, when Frank had a minor surgery, a nurse from the clinic would stop by to check on him. She was very attentive. Too attentive, I'd thought at the time, but I'd chalked it up to good care. Her name was Linda Prescott. She had access to medical records, to people's private lives. She moved away not long after Chloe disappeared. I always thought it was a coincidence. I called Detective Miller early the next morning. Linda Prescott, I said. She was a nurse. She left town after Chloe vanished. Can your friend see if any money ever went to her, or if she's back here? He was quiet for a moment. It's a thread. We'll pull it. I had to do something normal. I went to the grocery store. I pushed my cart slowly, picking up soup and bread. In the detergent aisle, I felt a prickling on the back of my neck. I turned. A woman was at the end of the aisle, looking at fabric softener. She was in her 60s with short blonde hair. She looked familiar in a distant way. She turned her head slightly, and our eyes met for just a second. There was no smile, no recognition, just a flat, assessing look. Then she turned and pushed her cart around the corner. My heart stalled. It was her. It was Linda. She was back. And she had just seen me. I abandoned my cart right there in the aisle and walked as quickly as I could to the front, my breath coming in short gasps. I didn't look back. I got in my car and locked the doors. She hadn't approached me. She just wanted me to know she was here. Everything was different now. Seeing Linda Prescott confirmed the danger was local and personal. She wasn't a shadowy figure. She was a retired nurse doing her shopping. That made her more frightening. She could blend in. She could knock on my door with a casserole, and no one would think twice. I drove straight to Agnes's house. "I saw her," I said, my voice unsteady. "The nurse. At the market." Agnes didn't ask questions. She pulled out her phone. "We're calling Miller, now." Miller came over to Agnes's house an hour later. We sat at her kitchen table. I described Linda. He took notes. "Prescott. I remember her. She was interviewed. She provided Frank's alibi for part of the afternoon Chloe went missing. She said he was at the clinic getting a prescription refilled. The timeline was tight, but it checked out." He looked up, his face grim. She vouched for him. If she was involved, she was protecting herself too. "What does she want now?" Agnes asked, practical as always. "Money," Miller said. "The payments stopped. Or the collection. Frank's death left loose ends. She might be trying to tidy them up, or she might be trying to take over." The thought of her having those trophies, those names, made my skin crawl. "We need her to show herself," I said. The words surprised even me. "I have the keys. She knows I have them. What if I make it clear I'm going to destroy everything?" Miller shook his head. "Too risky. She might become desperate." "I am desperate," I said quietly. "I can't live like this, jumping at every sound. I need this finished. For Chloe. For all of them." We argued back and forth. Finally, we settled on a plan. I would go to the storage facility office during a busy time. I would loudly tell the manager I was closing out my late husband's 2 units, 27 and 413, and that everything inside was going to be shredded and disposed of by the end of the week. Word would get around. Linda would have to make a move. 2 days later, I did it. My voice was loud and clear in the crowded office. The manager nodded, making a note. I felt terribly exposed, a rabbit in an open field. But I had to lure the fox out. Now I had to wait. I went home and called Susan. "Honey, would you and the boys like to stay with me for a few days? The house feels so empty." She was delighted. "Of course, Mom. We'll come tomorrow." Having my family here was a risk, but it was also a shield, and I needed to see their faces. If something went wrong, I needed them close. I spent the evening baking cookies, the normal grandmotherly task, feeling like a prayer. Susan and my 2 grandsons arrived the next afternoon, filling the house with noise and laughter and the thumping of soccer bags. Their presence was a comfort, but also a constant, low-grade alarm in my chest. I had brought the wolf to the door, and now my lambs were here. I watched them, my heart aching with love and fear. The call came on the second evening. Susan was upstairs giving the boys a bath. The phone rang, and the caller ID said, "Private number." I answered. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a woman's voice, calm and professional. "Evelyn, this is Linda Prescott. We saw each other at the market." My grip tightened on the receiver. "I know who you are." "I think we need to talk," she said. "About Frank, about his collections. I understand you're planning to destroy them. That would be a mistake. They have value." "Value?" I spat the word. "They are the remains of children." "They are insurance," she corrected smoothly. "Frank and I had an understanding. I provided certain services, alibis, access to medications. He provided me with financial security. His passing has left that security in jeopardy. The collections are my retirement fund, Evelyn. I intend to claim them. The sheer coldness of it took my breath away. She saw those terrible tokens as a pension. You will not touch them, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I'm going to the police tomorrow with everything. She laughed, a soft, dry sound. And tell them what? That your sainted husband was a monster. That you, the grieving grandmother, knew nothing for decades. They'll tear your family apart. Your daughter will never look at you the same. I'm offering you a cleaner solution. What solution? I whispered. You sign the units over to me, a simple property transfer. I take the boxes, and I disappear. Your family's name remains clean. Frank's legacy remains intact. All you have to do is let go of things you never wanted to find in the first place. She was offering me a quiet, shameful peace. To accept would betray Chloe and all the others. To refuse could shatter my family. I heard the boys laughing upstairs, a pure, happy sound. I need to think, I said, my voice hollow. You have until noon tomorrow, Linda replied. Meet me at the storage office. Come alone. If I see the police, or if you don't come, I have copies of certain documents. I'll send them to your daughter, to the newspapers. Choose your family's peace, Evelyn. Be smart. The line went dead. I stood there, the phone buzzing in my hand. She had backed me into a corner. I had until noon to decide between my family's future and the truth that could destroy it. The hum of the dial tone was the only sound in the kitchen. I placed the phone back in its cradle, my hand steady. A strange calm had settled over me. Linda Prescott thought she had me cornered, using my family as a threat. But she made a mistake. She showed me her weapon, shame. She believed I would choose a clean lie over a messy truth to protect my daughter and grandsons. She didn't understand a grandmother's love is fiercer than shame. I couldn't meet her alone. That would be foolish. But I couldn't bring the police storming in either. Linda would release her documents, and the damage would be done. I needed a third option. I waited until Susan had the boys settled with a movie upstairs. Then I called Detective Miller from the living room phone, my voice low. She called. Linda. She wants me to sign over the units to her at noon tomorrow. She threatened to send proof about Frank to Susan and the papers if I don't comply or if I involve the police. Miller was silent for a moment. We can have officers there. Plain clothes. No, I said firmly. If she sees anyone, she'll panic and follow through. I have another idea. You said your friend found the financial trail. Can he find anything else on Linda Prescott? Something she wouldn't want exposed? A scandal? A malpractice suit? Unpaid taxes? I was thinking like Frank now, looking for leverage. It made me feel sick, but it was necessary. I can ask, Miller said, but we have less than 20 hours. Then we work fast, I said. I'll meet her. I'll stall. I'll say I need to see the transfer paperwork. But I need something to counter her threat. We need our own threat. I hung up and sat in Frank's old recliner. It still smelled faintly of him. I was using his cold, transactional mindset to clean up his mess. The irony was bitter. I would go to that meeting. But I wouldn't go to surrender. I would go to negotiate the terms of her surrender. I just needed the ammunition. I looked at the ceiling, hearing the faint sounds of cartoon laughter from above. I was fighting for that sound. The next morning, I told Susan I had a meeting with the bank about Frank's estate. Do you want me to come? She asked, concerned. No, dear. It's tedious. You stay here with the boys. Bake some of those peanut butter cookies they love. I gave her a warm smile, the lie sitting heavily in my stomach. I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress, something a harmless old lady would wear. Detective Miller called just as I was leaving. We found something. It's not a home run, but it's leverage. Linda Prescott lost her nursing license 10 years ago in another state. It was hushed up, but the record is there. Negligence. A patient died. She paid a settlement and moved here, changed her name slightly. She's been Linda Preston here, not Prescott. If that gets out, her credibility vanishes, and she could face charges for practicing under a false name. It was something, a crack in her professional facade. "Thank you, Ray," I said, using his first name for the first time. "I have to go." "Evelyn," he said, his voice urgent. "My friend will be there. He's a big guy, looks like a retired trucker. He'll be reading a newspaper in his car near the entrance. If anything goes wrong, you wave. He'll come in." I agreed and hung up. The storage facility looked ordinary in the harsh, late-morning sun. I saw a large man in a sedan, his nose buried in a paper. Miller's friend. I parked and walked to the office, my purse on my arm. Linda was already there, standing by the counter. She wore a crisp pantsuit and a polite, professional smile. "Evelyn, thank you for being sensible." She handed me a single sheet of paper. It was a simple contract, transferring the rental agreement for units 217 and 413 to one Linda Preston. "I need to read this," I said, taking my time. "Of course." I scanned it. It looked legitimate. "You understand," I said slowly, "that once I sign this, you have no reason not to send those documents to my daughter anyway, to tie up your loose end." Her smile tightened. "I'm a woman of my word." "I know exactly what kind of woman you are, Linda," I said, keeping my voice low, or should I say, Nurse Prescott, the one who lost her license after that unfortunate incident with the morphine drip. Her face went perfectly still, all the polite warmth freezing solid. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. And I think the medical board and the family of that patient would be very interested to know where you are." I held her gaze. "Here is my counteroffer. You walk away. Today. You never contact me or my family again. You leave this town. In return, I don't forward what I have to the authorities in your old state. And you can believe I am a woman of my word." I saw the calculation in her eyes. Her threat was about to ruin my family. Mine was about to ruin her life and send her to jail. She was out-leveraged. The smile was gone, replaced by a cold, hard stare. She knew she had lost. Linda Prescott's stare was like ice. I could see the fury behind it, the decades of secret partnership with my husband crumbling because a grandmother had done her homework. She snatched the transfer paper from the counter. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Those collections are not just trinkets. They are records, very specific records. Frank wasn't sentimental. He was meticulous." "What does that mean?" I asked, my own voice cold. She leaned in slightly. "It means each item corresponds to a file with details, photographs, locations. The trophies in the units are just the key. The real collection, the ledgers, are somewhere else. Frank kept them separate for safety. My safety." A new layer of horror unfolded. She wasn't just a blackmailer. She was the keeper of the records. She held the maps to the graves. "Where are they?" The question left my lips before I could stop it. She gave a thin, joyless smile. "That's my insurance now, Evelyn. You have your little victory today. But if anything happens to me, if I so much as get a speeding ticket, those files get mailed to the police, to the newspapers, with a letter explaining how Frank's wife discovered everything and tried to cover it up to protect her family's name. You'll be implicated. You'll spend your last years in court, not with your grandsons." She had prepared for this. A dead man's switch. She turned and walked out of the office, her heels clicking sharply on the tile. I stood there, my brief moment of triumph dissolving into a deeper, more complicated dread. I had protected my family from immediate exposure, but I had not freed them. I had not freed those other girls. The truth was still locked away, and now Linda controlled it. I walked out to my car on shaky legs. The big man in the sedan gave me a slight nod. I nodded back, a signal that I was physically okay. But I wasn't. I drove home, the road blurring. When I got there, the house was filled with the smell of warm cookies. Susan hugged me. "How was the bank?" "Fine, dear, just fine." I hugged my grandsons, their small, warm bodies feeling like the most precious things in the world. I had bought them time, but at a terrible cost. The ledgers were still out there. Linda was still out there. And as long as she was, my family and the truth were both held hostage. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a silent, waiting phase. The silence after a storm is sometimes worse than the wind. Linda disappeared. Miller's friend watched her small rented house for 2 days, then reported she'd packed a suitcase and left. No forwarding address. The pressure was gone, but the weight remained. The threat of those ledgers hung over everything, a sword suspended by a single, fragile thread. I tried to return to normal. I went to the boys' soccer game. I clapped and cheered, a hollow feeling in my chest. A week later, a padded envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. My name was typed. Inside was a single, folded sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a page from what looked like a ledger. At the top was a name I recognized from the storage unit labels: Melissa Gable. Below were details: date, location, physical description, and at the bottom, a small hand-drawn map with an X. It was a page from Frank's True Collection. A note was paperclipped to it. A sample. "Remember our agreement. L." It was a reminder. She was proving she had the goods. She was also, I realized with a sickening jolt, giving me a choice. She had sent me the key to one girl's resting place. Melissa Gable's family had been waiting for 15 years. I held a map that could end their uncertainty. But if I used it, if I went to the police with this page, Linda would see it as an act of war. She would release everything and frame me. I was holding a piece of justice I could not deliver. I showed it to Miller. He examined the map, his face pale. "This looks like the old quarry lands north of the river. It's plausible." He looked at me. "What do you want to do, Evelyn?" I stared at the photocopy. I thought of Melissa's mother, perhaps a grandmother herself now, still wondering. I thought of Susan, of my grandsons. Doing the right thing would devastate my family. Doing nothing would slowly poison my soul. "I can't use it," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "Not yet. We have to find those ledgers. We have to find where she's hidden them." Miller nodded slowly. "The financial trail is cold. She used cash. But she's a keeper of records. She'll have them somewhere secure but accessible. A safe deposit box under another name." He promised to keep digging through old bank connections. I took the photocopy home. I didn't hide it. I placed it in my Bible, on the page about forgiveness. I had no forgiveness left, only a grim determination. Linda had given me a map, but not the one she intended. She had shown me what I had to do next. I had to find her library of horrors before she decided my family was too much of a liability. The clock was ticking on a timer I couldn't see. The quarry lands were a sprawling, overgrown place, fenced off for decades. I stood at my kitchen window, looking at the photocopy on the table. Melissa Gable was a real person. She had a family. That X on the map was a specific spot. Linda hadn't just sent a threat, she had sent a test. She was watching to see if my conscience would override my instinct to protect my own. It was a cruel, clever trap. I couldn't go to the police. But I couldn't leave that girl in the ground, unknown. There had to be another way, an anonymous tip. But anything traceable back to the ledger page could lead Linda to conclude I'd broken our deal. I needed a buffer, a completely unrelated reason for someone to find her. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I called the local historical society. I put on my sweetest old lady voice. "Hello, my dears. This might sound strange, but my late husband, Frank, was an amateur geologist. He left some boxes of notes about rock formations in the old quarry. He always said there was a unique strata near the North Cliff. I'm cleaning out his things, and I'd hate for his work to be lost. Would someone be interested in taking a look?" The woman on the phone was pleasantly dismissive, but said a volunteer might be able to come by next week. That wasn't soon enough. I needed a more immediate disturbance. The next morning, I drove out toward the quarry. I didn't go in. I stopped at a gas station nearby and struck up a conversation with the young clerk. "My husband used to talk about the rare birds out at the old quarry," I said, sighing. "I'm with the Audubon Society, you see. We've had a report of a possible nesting pair of barred owls in there. Such a nuisance. The fence is locked. Do you know if the county ever does inspections out that way?" He shrugged. "Sometimes. Kids break in sometimes too. Sheriff runs 'em off." That was it. I drove home, a plan forming. It was risky. That evening, from a payphone at the mall, I made an anonymous call to the county sheriff's non-emergency line. I affected a younger, annoyed voice. "Yeah, I was hiking near the old quarry, and I saw a bunch of teenagers with shovels inside the fence. Looked like they were digging. Probably looking for old bottles or something. Just thought you should know." I hung up. The next day, it was in the local paper's briefs. Sheriff's deputies investigated reports of trespassing at the deeded quarry lands. No individuals were located, but deputies noted signs of recent disturbance in the northern sector. My heart clenched. A disturbance. They had been to the area. Had they seen anything? I waited, terrified and hopeful. 3 days later, the headline made my knees buckle. "Human remains found in quarry during follow-up investigation." The article said the medical examiner was working to identify the remains. It said the discovery appeared to be historic. It said the investigation was ongoing. I sat at my table, the paper trembling in my hands. I had done it. I had given Melissa Gable back to her family without exposing my own. It was a small, secret victory, but it changed everything. Linda would see the news. She would know I had found a way around her rules. She would know I was still fighting. The quiet, waiting game was over. I had just made my next move. Now I had to wait for hers. The house was so silent I could hear the clock ticking in the hall. The phone rang at 3 in the morning, a shrill sound that tore through the quiet house. I knew who it was before I picked up. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Linda's voice was a dry whisper, devoid of sleep. "The quarry. That was your doing. A clever little anonymous tip. You broke our agreement, Evelyn." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding against my ribs. The digital clock on my nightstand cast a green glow over Frank's empty side of the bed. The sheets were cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." My voice was steadier than I felt. The news said it was trespassers. "Don't insult me," she hissed. "You moved a pawn. Now I move mine. The ledgers aren't in a safe deposit box. They're digital. scanned and uploaded to a secure server with a timed release. If I don't log in every week to reset the clock, they go out to every news outlet in the state. And after this stunt, I've added a new recipient, your daughter Susan's personal email, with a note from you, confessing your role in covering up Frank's crimes to protect the family name. A cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. Digital. That changed everything. There were no physical ledgers to find and burn. The evidence was in the cloud, somewhere I could never reach. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice hollow in the dark room. "I want you to understand the rules. You do not interfere. You do not try to be a hero. Melissa Gable is now a closed case. Let it be. If you so much as hint at another name, I will know, and the clock will stop. Your daughter will get that email before she finishes her morning coffee." The line went dead with a soft click. I placed the phone back in its cradle. The silence that followed was heavier than before. I had to find a way to disable that digital dead man's switch without triggering it. But the risk was immense. Every move I made risked exposing my family to the worst truth imaginable. Linda held all the cards now. She had modernized Frank's old evil, making it impervious to my grandmotherly intrusions. I got out of bed, my knees protesting the movement. I walked to the kitchen, the linoleum cool under my bare feet. I poured a glass of water from the tap and drank it slowly, trying to steady my breathing. The window over the sink showed the first hints of grey dawn. Linda had thought of everything. She was a nurse, but she understood technology. She must have someone helping her, or she learned it herself. I needed help too. Detective Miller had a friend, the accountant. Maybe they could trace something digital, find the server or the login patterns. But involving them risked Linda finding out. She might have alerts set up. As the sky lightened, I made a decision. I couldn't fight this alone. I had to trust Miller. But first, I needed to protect Susan directly. I would go to her house today and insist on checking her computer for viruses, something to install a program that might block or alert me to suspicious emails. It was a flimsy plan, born of desperation. It felt like a weight on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. I had to outsmart a killer's accomplice who was always one step ahead, and who now held the key to my family's destruction in a digital vault I couldn't see or touch. I stood on my daughter Susan's doorstep at 9 a.m., holding a bakery box of danishes. "Mum, what a surprise," she said, smiling but confused. The boys were already at school. "I was up early baking, and I thought you might like some," I said, stepping inside. The house smelled of laundry detergent and coffee. "And I wanted to ask a favor. My computer has been so slow lately. I know you're good with these things. Could you take a look at mine, and maybe show me what kind of virus protection you use?" Susan laughed. "Sure, Mum, but you should really let David handle that. He's the tech whiz." "I know, but he's so busy," I said, following her into the home office. Her computer was on, screensaver showing a slideshow of family photos. Chloe's picture flashed by, and my heart clenched. Susan noticed my expression. "It's okay, Mum. We remember her." She gave my hand a squeeze. I needed to get access to her email settings, to set up a filter or alert for any messages from unknown senders. But doing it without raising suspicion was tricky. "Can you just show me how you check for updates?" I asked, sitting in the chair. Susan leaned over, her perfume familiar and comforting. She clicked through menus, explaining as she went. I watched her hands, how confident they were on the keyboard. This was my daughter, the one I had to protect. As she navigated to the security settings, I casually said, "You know, I read about these phishing emails that look like they're from family. They can steal your information. Do you have anything set up to block those? Susan shook her head. Not really. I just delete anything suspicious. This was my opening. Maybe we should install something. For the boys' safety too. Their school information might be on here. Susan agreed, and she let me search for a reputable email filtering program. While she went to answer the phone, I quickly navigated to her email account. My hands trembled. I created a rule. Any email with the word ledger or frank or confession in the subject or body would be redirected to a folder and an alert sent to a secret email I had created. It was a stopgap, but it might buy time. Just as I finished, Susan came back. Everything okay? She asked. Yes, all set, I said, forcing a smile. But as I stood up, my eye caught on a notification in the corner of the screen. A calendar reminder. Meeting with school counselor, 3 p.m. Susan saw me looking. It's for Tommy. He's been having nightmares again. About being lost. The fallout from my secrets was already touching my grandson. The dread intensified. I hugged Susan tightly. He'll be okay? I whispered, hoping it was true. When I got home, there was a package on my porch. A small, flat box. No return address. I carried it inside, my stomach churning. I opened it with kitchen scissors. Inside was a single old-fashioned cassette tape. And a note. For your listening pleasure. A reminder of what's at risk. L. I didn't have a cassette player anymore, but I knew where to find one. Frank's old stereo in the workshop. Whatever was on that tape, I was sure it would change everything. Frank's workshop was dusty and silent. The cassette tape felt absurdly light in my hand, a relic from a time before digital everything. I found his old stereo system on a shelf, covered with a plastic sheet. My hands were unsteady as I plugged it in and inserted the tape. I pressed play. At first, there was only hiss. Then, Frank's voice, clear and calm, filled the small space. Log entry, October 12th. Subject, Melissa Gable. Age, 14. Location, Quarry North Bank. Procedure was smooth. Nurse Prescott provided the necessary sedation. Disposal complete. Took a ribbon from her hair. Blue. My legs gave way, and I sank onto a stack of old gardening magazines. His voice continued, clinical and detached, describing horrors in that familiar tone I had loved for decades. It was a recording of his ledger entries, spoken aloud. The tape played for several minutes, detailing 3 more names, each with dates and methods. Linda's name was mentioned each time, confirming her role as an accomplice. Then, Frank's voice shifted. If you're hearing this, Linda, it means I'm gone. Follow the protocol. The digital files are your insurance, but keep this tape as a physical backup. Remember, we did this together? Our secret? The recording ended with a click. I sat there, the hiss of the empty tape spinning. I had to get this tape to Detective Miller. It was physical evidence implicating both Frank and Linda. But the risk was terrifying. If Linda knew I had it, she would trigger the digital release immediately. The tape was a double-edged sword. It could convict her, but it could also destroy my family if mishandled. I ejected the tape and hid it in my purse. I needed to call Miller, but from a secure line. I drove to Agnes's house. She took one look at my face and put the kettle on. What's happened, Evelyn? I played the tape for her on Frank's portable player I brought. She listened, her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. That monster, she whispered. And that woman? I called Miller from her phone. Ray, I have something. A cassette tape. Frank's voice. He names Linda Prescott as an accomplice. Details of 4 killings. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Where are you? Stay there. I'm coming over. While we waited, the dread mounted. Every minute felt like an hour. Linda had sent this tape as a reminder, but she didn't know I would listen to it immediately. Or did she? She might be monitoring my movements. Miller arrived within 20 minutes. He listened to the tape, his expression grim. This is evidence. We can use this to get a warrant for Linda's digital records. But we have to move carefully. If she gets wind of this, she'll release everything. He took the tape. I'll have it copied and analyzed. We'll need to track her down, but this gives us probable cause. I felt a sliver of hope, but as Miller left, he turned back. Evelyn, be prepared. Once we move on this, it will become public. There's no way around it. I nodded, the weight of his words settling on me. The moment had come. I had evidence, but the path forward was fraught with exposure. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Did you enjoy the history lesson? I have more tapes. Perhaps we should trade. The digital clock is ticking. L. She knew. She knew I had the tape, and she was offering a deal. My hard-won evidence was now a bargaining chip in a game I didn't want to play. The text glowed on my phone screen, a digital serpent in the dark. Trade. What did Linda want? She had more tapes, presumably with more confessions. She wanted something from me in exchange for not releasing the digital ledgers. But what could I offer? Money? Access to the storage units? My silence was already broken. I didn't reply immediately. I needed to think. Miller had the tape, but Linda didn't know that. She thought I still had it. I could use that to my advantage. I needed to get all the tapes and disable the digital switch without endangering my family. The price might be letting Linda go free, or something worse. The dread was immense. Every decision felt like it could trigger catastrophe. In the morning, I texted back from a burner phone I bought at the drugstore. What do you want for the tapes? The reply came within minutes. The contents of Unit 413, the new trunk. Bring it to me, alone. Then we talk about the digital files. Unit 413 contained that polished trunk, the one with the daisy. I had no idea what was inside, but it was clearly important to her. Probably more trophies, or perhaps something that incriminated her further. I couldn't involve the police openly, but I needed backup. I called Miller. She wants to trade. The trunk in Unit 413 for more tapes. She's offering to discuss the digital files. Miller was cautious. It could be a trap. We can have officers covertly at the location. But if she sees them, it's over. We agreed on a plan. I would go to the storage unit, retrieve the trunk, and meet Linda at a neutral location, a crowded park. Miller's friend would be there, posing as a jogger. I went to the storage facility first. The manager let me into Unit 413. The trunk was still there, padlocked. I had no key for it. I called Linda. It's padlocked. I don't have the key. She sighed, as if annoyed. The key is taped under the lid of the toilet tank in the workshop, Frank's little hiding spot. Of course. I went home, found the key, and returned to the unit. With trembling hands, I unlocked the trunk. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were no trophies. Instead, there were bundles of cash, neatly stacked, and envelopes of documents. I flipped through one. It was a life insurance policy on Frank, with Linda as the beneficiary. Another was a deed to a small property in another state. This was her escape fund, her retirement. This was what she really wanted. The tapes were secondary. This money and paperwork were her future. I closed the trunk. It was heavy. I loaded it into my car, my back aching. The meeting was set for noon at the park. I drove there. The trunk in my trunk. The park was busy with mothers and children. I saw Miller's friend on a bench, pretending to read a newspaper. I parked and waited. Linda appeared from behind a restroom building. She walked toward me, empty-handed. "Where are the tapes?" I asked. "After I verify the contents," she said, nodding to my car. I popped the trunk. She looked inside, her eyes scanning. Then she smiled. "Good. Now, about the digital files. The login is reset weekly from a public library computer. Different branches. You'll never track it. But if I have this," she patted the trunk, "I might be persuaded to leave the country and let the clock run out. No login. Release in 7 days. Your choice." She was offering me a way out. Let her go, and the truth comes out anyway. But after she's gone, or stop her and risk immediate release. The decision was here. I had to decide. I looked at the children playing on the swings, my grandsons. I couldn't let her go. I gave a subtle nod to Miller's friend. He stood up and started walking toward us. Linda saw him. Her eyes widened. "You brought someone," she hissed. "It's over, Linda," I said. But she was fast. She slammed my car trunk shut, jumped into her own car parked nearby, and sped off. Miller's friend ran to his vehicle to pursue. I was left alone, the trunk still in my car, and Linda on the run. The digital clock was still ticking, and now she was furious. The relief that washed over me was tempered by a deep, aching sadness. The digital files were safe, the timed release disarmed. Linda was a fugitive, her money and plans confiscated. But the ledger of names, the proof of Frank's atrocities and her partnership, was now evidence in an official investigation. It would not stay quiet for long. Miller assured me they would handle the release of information with sensitivity, but there was no way to shield my family completely. The story of the quarry killer and his nurse accomplice would make headlines, and our name, Peterson, would be attached to it. I thought of Susan, of David, of my grandsons. How do you tell a child that their beloved grandfather was a monster? How do you explain that their grandmother knew and tried to protect them from it? I spent the next day in a fog of exhaustion. I cleaned the house mechanically, trying to impose order on the chaos in my mind. In the afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Susan. Her face was pale, her eyes red. She held up her phone. "Mum, what is this? I got a call from a reporter, asking about Dad, about some tapes, about a nurse named Linda." She stepped inside, her voice trembling. "They said he was involved in those old missing persons cases. They said you gave evidence. Is it true?" The price of my victory was here, standing on my doorstep in the form of my devastated daughter. All the dread I had endured crystallized into this moment. I reached for her hand. "Come inside, Susan. We need to talk." As I led her to the kitchen, the final stage of my personal war, I knew the hardest part was just beginning. The truth was out, and now I had to face my family with the ashes of our history. And somewhere, Linda was still free, and the world knew our secret. Susan's hand felt cold in mine as I led her to the kitchen table. The morning light through the window was too bright, too ordinary for the conversation we were about to have. She sat down, her eyes wide and frightened. "Tell me it's not true, Mum. Tell me they're lying." Her voice was a plea. I poured 2 glasses of water, my hands steady only from a lifetime of practice. I placed one in front of her and sat down. "It is true," I said, the words feeling like stones dropped into the quiet room. "Your father, Frank, was involved in the disappearances. He kept records. I found them after he died." I watched the color drain from her face. The nurse, Linda Prescott, helped him. I've been working with a retired detective to uncover it all. I spoke slowly, choosing each word with care, omitting the worst details about the trophies and the storage units. She didn't need those images yet. Susan stared at her glass, her breathing shallow. All this time? You knew and you didn't tell me? The hurt in her voice was a physical pain in my chest. I only found out after he was gone. I wanted to protect you and the boys. I thought I could handle it, keep it quiet. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. Protect us. By lying. Dad was a monster. And you've been sneaking around, meeting with detectives, while I was bringing you casseroles and worrying about your loneliness. Her anger was rising, hot and sharp. I was trying to spare you this, I said, my voice breaking. To spare Tommy and Jake from knowing their grandfather was what he was. Susan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. You don't get to decide that for me. He was my father. Chloe was my daughter. She was shouting now, tears streaming down her face. The full weight of my secrecy was laid bare between us, a chasm of betrayal. The doorbell rang, a jarring interruption. Through the window, I saw a news van parked at the curb. The outside world was here, at my door. Susan saw it too. They're already here, she whispered, her anger shifting to dread. I stood up. Don't answer it, she said. But I knew I had to. This was my doing. I walked to the door and opened it a crack. A young woman with a microphone stood there. Mrs. Peterson? We're from Channel 7. We have questions about your husband's alleged connection to the quarry killer case. Can you comment? I closed the door without a word, leaning my forehead against the cool wood. When I turned back, Susan was gathering her purse. I can't be here right now. I need to think. I need to talk to David. She wouldn't look at me. Susan, please, I said, but she was already walking to the front door. The boys have a game this evening. I don't know if we'll come. She left, closing the door softly behind her. The silence she left was heavier than any shouting. I had saved my family from a secret, but I might have lost them in the process. The house felt emptier than ever before. I looked at the phone, wondering when Detective Miller would call with the next step. The battle with Linda was over, but the war for my family had just begun. After Susan left, the silence in the house was a living thing. I moved through the rooms, tidying cushions that didn't need tidying, wiping counters already clean. My mind kept circling back to the look on her face, the betrayal, the horror. I had to do something to bridge this gap, but every action felt risky. I needed to mend what was broken with my daughter and shield my grandsons from the storm. It would demand my pride, my privacy, and perhaps any last remnant of the peaceful widow's life I'd thought I had. I called Detective Miller. He answered on the first ring. Evelyn? I saw the news van. It's starting. My daughter was here, I said. She knows. She's angry. What happens now? Miller sighed. The district attorney is reviewing the evidence. There will be a press conference, likely tomorrow. They'll name Frank and Prescott as persons of interest. Your name will come up as the source. I'm sorry. I already knew this, but hearing it made it real. What about Linda? Still at large, but with her face and name public, it's a matter of time. The money and documents from the trunk are solid evidence. She can't access her funds now. I hung up and looked at the family photos on the wall. Frank's smiling face was in so many of them. I took down the one from our 50th anniversary just last year. He looked so proud, so normal. I placed it face down in a drawer. The pressure was building from the outside world. But the weight within my own heart was worse. I had to see my grandsons. I had to explain in a way they could understand. I drove to Susan's house in the late afternoon. David's car was in the driveway. I knocked, my heart pounding. David opened the door. His face was grim, but not unkind. "Evelyn, can I see the boys? Just for a moment," I said. He nodded and stepped aside. Tommy and Jake were in the living room, playing a video game. They looked up. "Grandma," Jake said, smiling. Tommy was quieter. "Hi, Grandma." I sat on the sofa beside them. "I wanted to see you both. I know there might be some strange things on the news or at school. About Grandpa." Tommy paused his game. "Dad said Grandpa did some bad things a long time ago. Is that true?" He was 10, old enough for a simplified truth. "Yes, honey, he did. And Grandma has been helping the police understand what happened. It's very sad, and it's okay to be confused or upset." Jake, who was 7, leaned against me. "Will we get in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, never. You are both good boys, and we love you very much." I held them close, smelling their shampoo, feeling the solid reality of them. Susan came down the stairs. She saw us and stopped. Her expression was unreadable. "Mum," she said, "we need to talk. Alone." I followed her into the kitchen. She turned to me, her arms crossed. "David and I spoke. We're keeping the boys home from school tomorrow. The press will be everywhere." "I understand," I said. "Susan, I am so sorry. For all of it." She looked at me, and for a moment I saw my little girl again, scared and needing her mother. "I'm angry, Mum. So angry. But I'm also scared. For you. What happens to you now?" Her concern, despite everything, was a balm. "I'll be fine. I have to testify, to help close the cases for those families. It's what I have to do." She nodded slowly. "We'll get through this, as a family. But no more secrets." "No more secrets," I promised. As I left, I felt a fragile hope. But when I got home, there was a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, hand-delivered. It was from a lawyer representing the family of Melissa Gable. They were suing Frank's estate for wrongful death. And as his widow, I was named. The financial stability I thought I had was now under threat. The repercussions were spreading, and the toll was going to be more than emotional. The lawsuit papers lay on my kitchen table, a stark, formal font on crisp legal paper. The estate of Frank Peterson, my home, our savings, the modest investments. All of it was now potentially liable. My focus shifted from emotional repair to practical survival. I had to protect the assets for Susan and the boys, for whatever future they could have beyond this scandal. It would claim the last of Frank's financial legacy, and the force driving it was a grieving family who deserved justice in any form they could get. I called my own lawyer, an old family friend named Martin who had done our wills. His voice was weary when I explained. "Evelyn, this is complicated. If the suit succeeds, they could go after the house. But given the circumstances, Frank's crimes, there might be ways to argue. We'll need to see the will, the insurance policies." I thought of the life insurance policy with Linda as beneficiary, now void due to her criminal activity. But there was a smaller policy for me. "Martin, I want to set up a trust for Susan and the grandchildren, immediately, before any judgments." He agreed to draw up the papers. The next day was the press conference. I watched it on my small television. The district attorney, a stern woman, confirmed Frank Peterson and Linda Prescott were the subjects of an ongoing investigation into multiple homicides spanning decades. She praised the cooperation of a family member, not naming me, but it was clear. My phone began to ring. Old friends, distant relatives. I let the machine pick up. The weight of the community's gaze was a burden on my shoulders. I felt like a specimen under glass. In the afternoon, a car pulled up. It was Agnes. She came in with a basket of muffins and a hug. "You're not alone in this, Evelyn. The book club ladies. We're here for you." Her kindness made my eyes fill. We sat at the table. "What can I do?" she asked. "Help me think," I said. "The Gable family. Melissa's mother. She must be around my age. I want to, I don't know, acknowledge her. But anything I say could be used in the lawsuit." Agnes patted my hand. "Sometimes silence is the only safe thing. Let the lawyers handle it." But I couldn't be silent. I wrote a letter. Not about the lawsuit, but about Melissa. I wrote that I was sorry for her loss, that I had learned the truth only recently, and that I hoped the discovery of her remains brought some peace. I didn't mention Frank or blame. I sealed it and gave it to Detective Miller to pass along anonymously if possible. It was a small gesture, but it felt necessary. A shift came when Martin called back. "Evelyn, I reviewed Frank's will. He left everything to you, with a contingent clause about a charity that's now void. But there's a problem. The life insurance company is balking at paying out due to the criminal allegations. We may have to fight them too." So even the financial safety net was fraying. I felt tired down to my bones. That evening, Susan came over with the boys. She saw the lawsuit papers. "Mum, what does this mean?" I explained as simply as I could. "We might have to sell the house," I said. She shook her head. "No, this is your home. We'll fight it." Her determination was a comfort, but I knew the hard reality. The legal battles would be long and expensive. The quiet retirement I envisioned was gone, replaced by a new kind of struggle. As they left, Tommy hugged me extra tight. "Love you, Grandma." I held him, knowing that whatever came, these were the moments worth fighting for. The fight was far from over. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings and quiet family moments. The lawsuit was proceeding, but my lawyer was confident we could settle for a portion of the estate without losing the house. The press interest slowly faded, replaced by newer stories, but the stigma remained. I needed to find a way to live with the truth, to build something positive from the ashes. The price was the complete obliteration of the past I thought I knew, and the constant burden was the memory of what Frank had done. Detective Miller called with news. Linda Prescott had been apprehended in a neighbouring state, trying to cross the border with a fake ID. She was in custody, facing multiple charges. The digital files had been secured by the FBI, and the timed release was disabled. I felt no triumph, only a grim satisfaction that she could hurt no one else. Miller said, "She's talking, trying to deal. She's implicating Frank fully, claiming coercion. It's a mess, but the important thing is she's caught." I decided to visit the cemetery where Chloe's memorial stone was. We never had a body, but we had a place to remember her. I brought flowers, daisies. Susan met me there. We stood together in the cool spring air. "I come here often," Susan said softly. I used to talk to her. Now I don't know what to say. I put my arm around her. Say that she is remembered, that she is loved. That's all we can do. We cried together, for Chloe, for all the girls, for the years lost to lies. Afterward, we went for coffee. Susan looked at me across the table. "Mum, I've been thinking. The boys, they need normalcy. David and I are thinking of moving. A fresh start, maybe a town over. Not far, but away from all this." My heart sank, but I understood. "That might be for the best," I said, my voice steady. I'll miss seeing you every day, but your family's peace comes first. She reached across and took my hand. You'll come with us. We'll find a place with a mother-in-law suite. I'm not leaving you alone in that house with all those memories. Her offer was unexpected, a turn toward healing. I squeezed her hand, too choked up to speak. But the past wasn't done with me. When I got home, there was a message on my machine from a reporter writing a book about the case. He wanted an interview, offering payment for my story. The threat of exploitation was at my door again. I deleted the message. I didn't want money for this tragedy. Yet the idea of telling the story, my story, to ensure the truth was recorded, nagged at me. Not for profit, but for closure. I thought of the other families, perhaps a charitable fund, using any proceeds from a book to help families of missing children. It was a seed of an idea. That night, I dreamt of Frank. He was in his workshop, smiling, holding a gardening glove. I woke up with a start, the room dark. The hatred I felt was still there, but it was mingled with a profound sadness for the man he could have been, for the family he destroyed. The hard end of this chapter was acceptance. I had to accept that the man I loved was also a monster, and that my life from now on would be defined not by his secrets, but by my choices. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. I made a list. Call lawyer about trust, talk to Susan about moving plans, contact Detective Miller about a charity idea. The list was my roadmap forward. The dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the curtains. A new day, with new decisions. The sale of the house felt less like a loss and more like a necessary shedding. With the lawsuit settled for a sum that didn't require the sale, I decided to sell anyway. The memories in those walls were too heavy, too stained with hidden truth. Susan and David found a house with a comfortable guest cottage in a quiet neighborhood just 20 minutes away. My new home was smaller, with a sunny garden where I could plant flowers that had no history. On the day of the move, my grandchildren helped me unpack boxes. Tommy carefully placed my photo albums on a shelf, but we had removed all pictures of Frank. Jake hung a drawing he made for me on the refrigerator. A bright sun over a house with 3 people, labelled Grandma, Mom, and us. It was his vision of our family now. Susan bustled about, arranging furniture, her energy a sign of moving forward. The past had left me with this pared-down life, but the reward was an honesty that felt clean, if painful. A month later, I met with Detective Miller and the district attorney. They asked if I would be willing to meet with the families of the victims, privately, to answer questions if I could. I agreed. The first meeting was with Melissa Gable's mother, Helen. We sat in a quiet room at the police station. She was a woman my age, with tired eyes. "Thank you for the letter?" she said first. I nodded. "I'm so sorry," I said, and we talked for an hour. She asked about Frank, about what kind of man he was. I told her the truth, the good father and grandfather I had seen, and the hidden monster I never knew. It was cathartic for both of us. No anger, just shared grief. She said knowing where Melissa was had brought her peace after 15 years of wandering. That was something. With Miller's help, I established the Chloe Memorial Fund, using a portion of the estate sale money. It would provide resources for families of missing children. I didn't put my name on it publicly. It was enough to know it existed. The press had moved on, and my life settled into a new rhythm. Mornings in the garden, afternoons with my grandsons after school, evenings with Susan and David for dinner twice a week. The quiet personal resolution was not happiness. That felt too distant. But a steady contentment born of truth and family. One evening, sitting on my small porch, Agnes came over with pie. We rocked in the chairs, watching the fireflies. "You've come through it, Evelyn," she said. "I have," I replied. And I had. The revenge I sought wasn't against a person, but against the silence. I had broken it, and in doing so I had freed myself and protected my family in the only way left. Frank's legacy was one of horror, but mine would be one of remembrance and care. The moon rose, a silver crescent in the deep blue sky. Inside, the light was on in the kitchen, and I could hear Susan laughing with her boys. I went in to join them, closing the door on the past and stepping into the warm, noisy, truthful present.